Welcome to another video of the E30 S54 build. In this video we will be placing fiberglass and a two-part epoxy resin on the holes that we have cut on the intake manifold, and we will start with placing some tape behind the hole. The reason for this is because as I place the epoxy down, I don't want it to fall through the hole, so this will provide some sort of backing to make sure the fiberglass does not sag, nor does the epoxy seep out from behind. I'm just using some PVC tape here, and I'm cutting a piece off for the smaller section. It's a little bit tricky to get my hands behind. Before this, I used some brake clean to clean off any oil or residue that would stop the tape from getting a good seal against the intake manifold. And I'm just carefully trying to shape the tape behind. The larger hole is more difficult due to it being close to the velocity stack, and I'm just trying to cut a larger piece of tape and work myself from the furthest part towards the center. And I'm trying to shape the tape the best as I can, making sure that there are no holes or cracks. And this is a fairly time-consuming process. Now that I have the tape in place, I have fitted the intake manifold on one more time to make sure that there is enough space between any of the parts and the intake manifold, because once the epoxy sets, it'll be very difficult to try this again. And it looks like we have enough space between the oil cooler lines. And the next step now is to get the epoxy ready and the fiberglass. Now we are going to work with some fiberglass and a two-part epoxy. First of all, we are going to have to take out the fiberglass outside of the bag. Make sure to wear gloves when doing so. This style of fiberglass is really good for epoxy, as it can soak up the material very well. This is a fairly large mat that we have here, so I'm just going to cut out a small section for what we need for the small hole, as well as a larger section for the larger hole. Using a sharp pair of scissors, I am now cutting out a section of the fiberglass to cover up the small hole. Make sure that there is enough overlap between the intake manifold and the fiberglass to allow proper bonding between the fiberglass, epoxy, and the plastic of the intake manifold. I am also cutting out 2 layers for each hole for added security. This is the epoxy that we will be using. I have decided to use the slow hardener for better mechanical properties. The disadvantage to that is that it does take longer to cure. Please read all the safety instructions as well as care for handling this material on the labels. The ratio for this epoxy is a 2-to-1 ratio, 2 parts part A, 1 part B. It's important that you get the correct ratio using a measuring cup. We'll also be using a disposable brush to apply the epoxy. It's important that we mix the 2-to-1 ratio of epoxy very thoroughly, and to make sure that it is also a consistent mixture. I have fast forwarded how I apply this on, ensuring that the tape is still sealed. I apply a base layer of the epoxy onto the hole and place the fiberglass on top. Slowly taking my time, I am shaping the fiberglass, ensuring that it bonds onto the plastic. There is about a 40-minute working time with this epoxy. And as you can see, making sure that there are no air bubbles around or under the fiberglass between the plastic. And I was fairly generous with the epoxy as I wanted to make sure that it would seal correctly, especially for the first layer. I'm going to let that dry overnight. Next day, we see that it has set very nicely. It is very hard and durable, but the only test is when we have it in the car and driving. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe to the AutoCoin Academy. Thank you.